Yes.
All right.
Very good. All right. Welcome everybody at this Climate at Cafe Green Blue Online, as we say it. I'm Sydney Stacks from the municipality of Nijmegen. I have a background in ecology and water management. I'm doing this for over 5 years now with Floris Bogaert. We had a shared interest in water management in general, but mainly bioswales. However, we're already talking about so many different topics from more engineering perspectives, hydromorphological, chemical, climate adaptation in general, but also participation, how communities are involved in green-blue infrastructure. And now we're also focusing on other topics like the solar panels. But I won't talk about that very much because Shanae can tell us why we are here and listening to another great episode.
Yes, thank you. Welcome everybody. So today is our third episode that's dedicated to the Sparkles project, and this research project is looking at upscaling floating solar. And today we're going to be hearing from Henriette Tulp, and she will tell us about her research on factors that influence community acceptance on floating solar PV systems. So we haven't looked at the social kind of perspective yet within the ClimateCafes. So we're excited to hear from Henriette today. And thank you for joining us, even though it's so late where you are. But if you can share your screen, the floor is yours.
Wait, can you see it now?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, it's coming.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even through the firewall of China. Yes. All good.
I think so. Okay. So last year I did a research on floating photovoltaic projects. It was called Turning Rejection into Reflection, and it was part of my master thesis. So there I explored the factors influencing community acceptance of these floating voltaic projects. So to introduce the topic, so as I'm sure all of you know, we're all very busy for net zero emission goals to driving renewable energy expansion. And one of the ways we're doing that is through floating photovoltaics, which are solar panels installed on water bodies like reservoirs, lakes, and ponds. And they hold certain benefits. One of them is land conservation. It avoids land use conflicts, which is especially relevant in a country as the Netherlands, where there's also lots of land for residential areas or for agriculture. There are also some environmental benefits. For example, it reduces evaporation, it reduces algae growth, and it protects the shoreline from wave erosion and offers shelter for aquatic life. And also it increases the efficiency through natural cooling. So therefore, we see a significant growth. Back in 2014, we only saw 10 WP, whereas that grew to 2,600 in 2020, and the World Bank expects that it might be around for it. However, as with all renewable energy sources, there is a major key challenge, which is community acceptance. So for this research, I actually found out that there is not much that we know about community acceptance of these projects. So for other more established forms of renewable energy, such as wind energy or ground-mounted solar, there's a lot of research. But for floating solar, there's not yet that much research. There is research on the technological side, also a bit on the environmental side, so more of like what are the consequences for nature, but not so much what are the consequences for people that live close to these projects. So therefore, my research objective was to explore the factors that influence community acceptance of large-scale floating solar projects, and thereby aiming to address the gap in the literature and support a successful adaptation within the global clean energy transition. The research was guided by a few research questions, of which the main research question was which factors have the most influence on the level of community acceptance of large-scale floating photovoltaic projects, and then I had 4 sub-questions. The first one was a literature review analysis. I reviewed a lot of articles to see which influencing factors were identified in the existing literature on community acceptance of renewable energy projects in general. Then I did a quantitative community analysis to see to what extent these factors were recognized by local communities, and a qualitative stakeholder analysis to see if they were also recognized by political and non-political stakeholders. And in the end, I did a comparative analysis to see the difference between my cases, but we'll come back to that later. So the research framework looks something like this. So first, a lot of literature review, focusing first on renewable energy projects in general, and then scaling it down to large-scale floating photovoltaic. Then in the next step, I developed my analytical framework. Then I used that analytical framework on my case studies, doing their community survey and stakeholder interviews. And then I did a comparative analysis with the results of those, leading to my results, discussion, and recommendations. So to start with the theory, one of the establishing articles here was that of Wissenhagen et al. In 2007. They basically established the definition of social acceptance for renewable energy, and they said it was the extent to which renewable energy projects are supported by various societal actors, including governments, local communities, and markets. So you can basically see three different elements in there, which I illustrated in this figure. And then for this research, I was focusing on community acceptance, which is the extent to which renewable energy projects are supported by local actors, including residents, community organizations, local businesses, and municipal authorities. Then back in 2015, Upham et al. Took this definition of Wissenhagen and then further refined it. And they said there are basically three components to community acceptance, which is political acceptance, stakeholder acceptance, and public acceptance. And I will be focusing on these three dimensions. So then I started reading a lot of articles about the community acceptance of renewable energy. And the numbers in the top row, they all represent like the different articles I read. And then on the left side, you see all the different factors I find in these articles. And if a box is colored, it meant that I found one of these factors in one of these articles. Different colors represent different kinds of renewable energy. So this, through this, I could already answer sub-question A. Then this led to the development of my analytical framework. So I had community acceptance on the top, and then I had 6 factor categories, which were landscape factors, socioeconomic factors, environmental factors, technological factors, governance factors, and project-specific factors. And then I had 3 cases. All 3 were in the Netherlands. They were Bijlen, Tienaarlo, and Deest. One of them was the supportive case, which is Bijlen. Tienaarlo was neutral, and resistant was Deest. And I chose 3 cases to explore why the acceptance levels vary and how insights can apply to other contexts. So more about the generalizability. So quickly introducing my 3 cases. First one is Bijlen. It's in the province of Midden-Drenthe, and there are approximately 11,000 people in this town. The solar park was commissioned in 2019 and consists out of 40,000 panels. And it was developed on a former sand extraction lake. The developer was GroenLeven, together with the company that previously owned the lake. But now the ownership of the park itself is transferred to the local energy cooperative and the regional water authority. And the public response here was broad public support and very positive media coverage. The Tienaarlo, which is slightly smaller, but also in Drenthe. That solar park is approximately the same size. It was commissioned in the same year, but later expanded. And it was also on a former sand extraction lake with the same company, this time with another company together. There was not really any public response here. When I went to the town, actually, a lot of people didn't even know the park was there, even though they lived quite close to it. And then in Deest, that is in the province of Gelderland, the park is slightly bigger than the others, but not that much. It was commissioned in 2021, also on a former sand extraction lake. But what is interesting here is that the developer is once again GroenLeven, but this time with the municipality instead of a sand extraction company. And currently it's owned by foreign investors. Here there was strong public resistance, a petition, and in the end, even a lawsuit. So then for my research design and data collection, I used a mixed methods approach of quantitative surveys and qualitative interviews to cover the whole spectrum of community acceptance. So for political acceptance and stakeholder acceptance, I used interviews, and then for public acceptance, I used surveys. Starting with the survey, so I wanted to survey people that live within a 5-kilometer radius of such a project. And then for the distribution methods, I used mailbox drop-off with the QR code, so people could like scan that and then online fill in the survey. I distributed around 3,600 surveys in total, and the goal was to get 100 responses per case, which basically in all of the cases worked out with total response rate of 337. There might be an announcement, I think, in a few minutes, but I'll just like mute for a second if that's possible and then go on. So for the survey, I first asked them, like, how would you rate your support or opposition to the floating solar project in your area? I did this so that to see if my case selection was indeed correct. If, for example, Bijlen was indeed the most positive case and Deze the most negative case. And then I took all of the factors I found in the literature on renewable energy and asked people to rate how important they found that for their for the solar projects. And then if there were any other factors that were not yet in the literature that also influenced their views. So the results for the first question, indeed, the case selection was right. Bijlen was the most positive case and Deze the most neutral, although there was not a statistical difference between Bijlen and Tinalo. Bijlen still on average scored slightly higher. And then for the other survey results, so here you can see all the categories I asked the people about. 1 second, please. Okay, sorry, I'm back. So for the survey questions, yeah, for the second question, I asked them like to rate how important they found each of these factors. And the results were actually really interesting. Governance factors were found very, very important, and also landscape factors and environmental factors scored relatively high. For technological factors, the reliability, people found that very important, and socioeconomic factors and project-specific factors, especially project-specific factors, they actually scored a bit lower than the other categories. So then I also still had the interviews. So I reached out to people and in the end spoke to 16 different stakeholders, some political stakeholders, mostly like aldermen or policy advisors, and some general stakeholders. So these are very different people from GroenLeven, the developing company, but also like the secretary from a fishing club, or people who worked on the project cooperative. So what I did is basically I asked them that during the realization of the project, and then one of these categories, factors played a significant role for your organization, particularly in relation to its acceptance, and if so, if they could specify which ones and explain why they were important. That basically led me to this framework. So on the top, you see the different people I interviewed and which category they belong to, and then the colors they represent the different cases, and then on the left you see some of the categories. I couldn't include them all because it wouldn't fit the page, but you get a general idea of what they mentioned as important. So, for example, visual impact or landscape context, they got like mentioned a lot. And then I had the results of the public acceptance surveys and the interviews, which led me to answer my main research question. So for that, I merged all the data. So for the public acceptance, I had a score which was like the average score of the survey on a scale from 0 to 1. And for political acceptance and stakeholder acceptance, it was a ratio of how often a specific topic was mentioned divided by the total amount of people in that category, which led me then to my average acceptance scores, which I calculated for all of these. Sometimes you also see things in italics, such as actor collaboration or societal engagement and visibility. These were factors that were not present in the literature, but they emerged through the stakeholder interviews. So that was also interesting to see, and some of them were mentioned quite a lot, actually. Then, what were the main factors? Actually, there were 6 factors that significantly were rated as more important than the other factors in both the survey and stakeholder interviews. Those were the visual impact, the landscape context, the impacts on wildlife and ecosystems, trust, local involvement, and economic benefits for the community. So then I knew which factors were most important, but I still wasn't really sure why in some cases there were people were more positive about it, whereas, for example, in days people were not so positive about it. So what actually explains the difference in perceived acceptance across the different case studies? So for that, I just did a statistical analysis. I won't get too much in detail about it, but there was only one factor where one case scored significantly different in how important it was found from both other cases, which was distance from the shore, but that actually was not that much of a relevant factor. So basically my conclusion from this was that the same factors were important across the cases, but the difference in acceptance stemmed from how these factors were addressed in practice. So then I used mostly the interviews with the various stakeholders to see how these projects were implemented. And what I found out there, for example, for Bijlo, was that there was a lot of early collaboration with community and public partners. There were financial benefits through local ownerships. And then in Days, which was the most negative case, one of the things that was an issue for a lot of people was that it was highly visible from nearby homes. There was a contested landscape identity, so some people saw this as a industrial, relatively underused lake, whereas other people saw it as a place they used for recreation, for fishing, for walking their dogs. So that was one of the reasons why that was really contested. And also that community trust was weakened by top-down decision-making, and people felt excluded from the decision-making process. Another interesting key finding was that there were significant divergences between what different people thought. So, for example, procedural justice and distributive justice were rated very important on the public survey. But actually, in the interviews, they were not mentioned that often, not directly, but also not indirectly. So this is something that maybe policymakers or other stakeholders might overlook. So this should be looked at with caution. And then initiator's origin, that was actually found quite important by all the stakeholders, but actually the general public, they did not care as much about that. Place attachment was also interesting, as it was mentioned a lot of times in the survey, but actually it was not mentioned, I think, any time with the policymakers and the general stakeholders. It was mostly absent. So for the discussion, finally, so as for the theoretical implications, I would say that these findings confirm and build upon existing research. Various factors that were mentioned before a lot in the literature, such as visual impacts, local involvement, and trust, they remain critical. But landscape context is really an emerging concerner. It wasn't mentioned that much in the literature before, and it's really getting more important. Some practical implications for developers to engage early, to tailor it to the local context, and to ensure transparency. for policymakers to mandate or incentivize inclusion, even when making plans from the very beginning, and also some implications for the subsidy timelines. So it is great that they have subsidy timelines, but also in these timelines, there should be enough space for community engagements and for the design to minimize visual ecological impacts and to communicate the tech reliability also to the public and not just to the policymakers. So the limitations, well, all the cases were Dutch. They were in similar woody body types, namely they were all on sand extraction lakes. There might have been a bit of a survey bias, as people who care about this particularly, they are more likely to fill in this survey. Also maybe a bit of a retrospective influence, as I asked the people that already live near a lake, so their own project nearby them that might have influenced how they thought about the project. And there might be some factor overlap between some of the factors. Then for future research, I would definitely suggest to apply to a broader context and maybe other countries with other decision-making mechanisms, but also to other reservoir types. And I think I went to it was a kind of a workshop in one of the municipalities, and they actually really explored the concept of local involvement. So who is involved at what stage? And I feel like all of these factors, they have so much more to say than they are right now. So I feel like they could be explored a bit further. So then for the conclusion, I would say that community acceptance of floating solar depends mostly on visual impact, landscape context, impacts on wildlife and ecosystems, trust, local involvement, and economic benefits for the community. And another important finding was that the same factors were actually important across all the cases, but the outcomes differed by how they were addressed. So for Bijlen, we saw high support through mostly social engagement. I'm sorry, there's another one. Okay, I'm sorry. Then for Tinalo, it was mostly neutral. The project, as I said in the beginning, had minimal visual and recreational disruption. Like many people didn't even know it was there. And then in days, there was a lot of resistance due to poor communication and a contested landscape context. So one important takeaway message to end with is that the energy transition is as much a social project as a technical one. And its success depends on how well communities are heard, involved, and empowered in the process. And only by embracing this can we create a more just, inclusive, and sustainable energy future. Do you have any questions? Wait.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for this great presentation. Questions, anyone? Well, we first try to do the public besides Floris, Bogart, Shanae, and me, so go ahead. No questions from the public. Maybe they will pop up later, probably.
Shall I start to
you go
open
ahead.
the ground then? Yeah. I was, great knowledge, especially, there's not a lot of social monitoring of this. I had a question about DAST. There was a lawsuit, you said. What was specifically the lawsuit about, and did they win, or is there any jurisdiction now, or?
No, they did not win. Actually, the fishing club, they had a lawsuit against the municipality, because apparently in the 1980s they rented a lake to a sand extraction company, and then they said that, or there always had been speculations that if the sand extraction at some point would end, that the lake would be used for recreation or recreational purposes. So the people of Dace, especially the older residents or the people that have been living there for a longer period, they were really hoping that now that the sand extraction had ceased, that they would get a recreational site, which was not the case. And it was a very difficult lawsuit because I'm not sure why the lights go out. It was a very difficult lawsuit because all these papers, they were from the 1980s, 1990s, so relatively old. But then in the end, they did not win, and they could continue with the solar park. Yeah.
Interesting facts. Yeah. Tineke.
Yeah, there I am. Hey, thanks for this very, very clear presentation, and it's really interesting. And I'm not an expert in this field, so my question may be a bit, I don't know, oddly formulated or so. But I was wondering about the independence of the people that you interview, because I can also imagine that if you have like a close community, they influence each other, and that when one starts to be, you know, against this kind of activities, then it drags along the whole community or so. How does that work, or how do you take that into account in these kind of analyses?
Yeah, that was actually a difficult point because obviously I wanted the results to be not biased by how these people thought about it, but how they really perceived the process in a like neutral way. So I tried to interview people that were from that might potentially have different perspectives. So not only people from, for example, the Groen Leven, the project developers, but also people that like one man that owned like a B&B next to the lake, and one guy from a fishing club. So all these different kind of people to get like a very different perspective, and also to include all of their perspectives, what they found important, to get like the most comprehensive view. I think that was mostly my approach. So like different kinds of people, and also because it was very easy for me to, like, if I spoke to someone from the developing company, to just ask for like another person from that company I could talk to, but I specifically chose not to do that because I wanted to have very different stakeholders. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does, yeah. And then I still think, like, do they still might influence each other by putting, yeah, you know, articles in the newspapers, or spreading, I don't know, brochures, or trying, I don't know. But
I think I have a
But I
follow-up
see your
question
point.
that, because I was wondering maybe the same thing as you, Tineke, that did you see, first of all, thank you for this clear presentation. It was really, really great, really good to follow, really structured it really well. Sometimes it was a bit fast, and at the stakeholder part, I was really wondering if there are like, if you saw different compositions of the stakeholders, and like Tineke maybe said that there are some groups that are maybe more presented or maybe even absent. I have some experience with visual organizations, for instance. They tend to post. They can post stuff somewhere and talk to other people, but this also accounts for other groups, and maybe if they're like not present, that could of course maybe influence things, like Tineke said. So I was wondering if you have looked at it or have any data on that, maybe even.
I specifically asked all of them if what they thought would be other important stakeholders. So not necessarily from like the same company, but to get like the whole image. And obviously they know each other because they have been involved in the same project. So even if they're like opposing each other, they know each other. So I think that was very interesting to see all their different views, but also if someone had said something in an interview, I verified that with, for example, if someone from the fishing club, he said something, I in a very neutral way, I verified if the person from the municipality thought about that in the same way.
Yeah.
And obviously I gave very different answers, which was interesting.
Yeah, but did you
They
also
experienced-
saw like that are at the different locations that you researched that some stakeholders maybe weren't present or underrepresented, or did you get all of them for all locations, and did you feel like that they have the same presence in the discussions?
Yes, I think so. I think there was a bit of a buzz. I think the developers from GroenLeven know a lot about it, whereas, for example, the directors of the sand extraction lake of like that were owning the lake and they were just leasing it to, for example, to municipality. Their opinions weren't as strong about many of the subjects, I would say. But overall, if I look at the composition of stakeholders, I would say that I spoke definitely to the most important persons. Only the elder man from Tinalo was missing because he retired, I think last year or 2 years ago. So yes, I think the composition, consists out of the people that were most relevant.
All right. That was my question. Thanks.
Yeah. Bert.
Ed, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Impressive results. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have two short questions. First, did the owner of the area play a role in the acceptance of this floating solar panels? I mean, the real owner, the extraction company?
Yes, because they have to give the permission to lease the lake to them, and they also, for them, it's very beneficial because they obviously get paid to like lease the land. So the land was underutilized by them because either sand extraction wasn't going on in the whole lake anymore, or it stopped at all. So for them, it was like a passive income. So yes, they were very much involved and still benefiting from the process. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And did you find any distance related effects, the distance between the location of the lake and the village?
No, they were approximately all the same distance from the lake was approximately all the same distances from the village. Only in the case of days, there were people living directly next to the lake. It were like maybe 5 to 10 houses. Those were people that like really overlooked the solar park. Whereas for the cases in Drenthe, it was mostly like shielded off with trees and no one was really living there. But like the actual village, it was all the same distance for all of them. Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't find any distance related effects on the way people reacted?
Well, I expected that if you would obviously overlook these solar panels, that you would be more against it. But that wasn't necessarily the case. I spoke to multiple people around the lake, and some of them, they were indeed very much opposing it. But other people, apparently GroenLeven, they made like a deal with them so that they could only also get like the solar panels on their roof for free. So there was some form of compensation, which actually led to some people being quite supportive of the project.
Thank you.
Karel.
Hi, Henriette. Are there any striking differences in the time it took before the initiation of the project and the finishing of the project? How long did it take on average? Or is there an average, or is there a difference between the three cases?
Yes, for the cases in Drenthe, they were developed a bit earlier. And when I spoke to the municipality, they said that realizing the cases back in 2019 was actually easier than it is now, because now there is a lot more public participation expected, which also takes a bit longer than to realize it. So yes, there was definitely a difference, and also because there was a lawsuit in this, it took a little longer. But not that much longer, because the GroenLeven was so sure that they would actually win that they started building it already before they even got the real permission, let's say. Yeah, but from the policymakers, I understood that building such a project these days takes longer. So I think that's something to also consider for future cases.
Nice. Any last questions? Charney?
Well, I have a last question.
Yeah.
If you would compare, would you say there would be a different level of acceptance for other options like solar on land or wind
Yes,
turbines?
that's very interesting, actually, you ask that, because in the survey I included in the end a question like, are there any additional factors? And people, they named additional factors, but they also used it as a reason to like tell me anything about it they wanted, actually. And because these were all quite like rural villages, people were actually really opposing like solar energy on land. That was really a big issue for them. So they actually were quite okay with it that it was now on water, because at least it wouldn't like ruin their farmlands. So yeah, and then obviously people were also used that to express their concerns about wind energy. So overall, they said like, if there has to be like renewable energy, they consider this to be a quite acceptable option, especially compared to solar on land.
Interesting. Ja.
Ja, dan komt Bert nog even. Hè? Met zijn
sorry.
allerlaatste vraag.
The last and
Sorry.
final question.
Last question, sorry. Yeah.
I didn't hear you speaking from over the NIMBY syndrome. Did you encounter anyone who talked about NIMBYism?
Not really, because it was quite interesting, because in especially the earlier literature, I think between like 2000, 2010, I really saw a lot of like researchers referring to it in NIMBY. But yeah, like in the later articles, I think ever since 2010, it wasn't that much present. And also when I asked the people in the public in the survey in the end, there was not really anyone that said like, do it somewhere but don't do it here. So I don't think that was necessarily relevant for them.
Oh, okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, it might be the other way around, because especially the people from the municipalities, they were very proud to have a floating solar park in their municipality, and they really thought it like good for their reputation and to like come off as sustainable as a municipality. So maybe it's actually
It should have. It could be used in marketing terms, more or less.
Oh, the connection.
Someone is frozen.
It's frozen.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're back. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I said it could be used as a kind of marketing tool.
Yes. Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Especially, yeah, they were very proud, and also yeah, that's one of the reasons, like I asked like, oh, why do you want to participate in this interview? And some of them really said, oh yeah, I think it's so cool that we've accomplished this. So yeah, definitely.
Nice to hear. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're coming to an end, I would say, before more announcements come and the lights will go out, Henriette.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Suddenly you are in the dark. No, warm applause. Really great presentation and great Q&A. You're always you're also the one that finishes this season or this year actually. So next week there's a small evaluation. There's not a content session, but everyone who wants to join, because when we end the year we always look back, and also it will be great to have your feedback, new suggestions, frustration. I don't know. It could be all, that new speakers or topics that will come for the new year. We will start the new year with some green-blue transitions in the Baltic states, which are starting. It's quite interesting to see what's happening in Riga or other Baltic states. And also we will have some not so young professionals. We will have some experience learning from people that almost retired or retired. We'll share their knowledge and look back on their lives. So that's also a topic that we will start next year. But maybe this is an inspiration for you as well. If you want to hear topics, feel free to log in next week the same time. And otherwise, of course, we hope to see you next year. Did I forget anything, Shernay, Sydney?
No, I think that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well then, thanks, and we hope for some suggestions. And thanks for all that have been so committed the whole year. And have a great Christmas and New Year, I would say.
Yeah. Thank
you,
you,
great
everybody.
evening first.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Sleep well, Henriette.
Straight to bed.
Sweet dreams.
Thank you, Carl.